The music written by Miles Davis, he calls So What?
In an age when everyone and everything traveled by water, Milwaukee had the best natural harbor on the western shore of Lake Michigan. That single fact explains both the city's location and its early growth. In the 1830s, settlers flocked to such a promising town site. They founded 3 rival settlements, Juneautown, Kilbournetown, and Walker's Point, that fought a small-scale civil war over the issue of bridges. Cooler heads finally prevailed in 1846 when all 3 sides came together as the city of Milwaukee.
Why did the people dislike each other so much as to want to be physically separated?
I think the reason there was a conflict was there was economic advantage to be had, and all 3 sides had their own unique advantages, and they were all trying to exploit them at the expense of others. I think that's what it comes down to. It wasn't a grudge match. It wasn't that they had personality conflicts. It was that each was out for himself in terms of promoting his side of town. So the Milwaukee River is the reason Milwaukee exists. Back in the days when Milwaukee was settled, everybody got here by water. And they didn't have breakwaters, so the harbor was the river itself. So from where Jones Island is today all the way up to around Cherry Street, it's like 2 miles. So that was just a thicket of masts. That was Milwaukee's harbor. So the river is why there is a Milwaukee and why Milwaukee's here. But once they got here, the river itself became a cause for dissension. You had to have an east side and a west side. That was just the geography of the site.
Solomon Juneau was born near Montreal, Canada on August 9, 1793. He was an agent for the American Fur Company when they established the trading post in southeast Wisconsin in 1818. He saw promise in the area and bought a stretch of land between the Milwaukee River and the lake.
So Juneau on the east side, he's a fur trader who came here back in 1818, and he didn't care about a city back in 1818. He was just basically a kid, kind of working in the fur trade. And he stayed and was smart enough, savvy enough to learn to trade real estate as well as furs, and made and lost a fortune. So he's a really interesting guy. He became Milwaukee's first mayor, and that's very unusual for someone to come from the fur trade to urban settlement. They're usually pushed aside by these sharp, hard-dealing Easterners from New England.
Byron Kilbourne was born in Granby, Connecticut on September 8, 1801. After moving to Ohio in 1803, he joined his father as a state engineer and surveyor.
Kilbourne was one of those sharp dealers. He comes in 1834, and he finds Juneau on the east side of the river, so he had an airtight claim to that land. It was probably the most favored site because it's closest to both the river mouth and the lake where everybody's coming in. So he settles on Milwaukee's west side and has kind of a very slow siege of the east side. He tries to sort of deny them settlement so people would come to his side of town. You have Walker's Point finishing a very distant third, and he had the early geographic advantage. He was closest to Milwaukee's front door.
George Walker was born in Lynchburg, Virginia on October 22, 1811. He arrived in Milwaukee in 1834 and was not a major player due to legal troubles.
So that's where the Water Street Bridge crosses today, around those condos, and Collectible Coffee and all this sort of hip stuff, happening in Walker's Point today. But that was closest to Milwaukee's front door and had easiest access to the interior as well. So that's probably where Milwaukee should have developed, where downtown should have developed, if geographic common sense had been followed. It didn't because you have politics operating on the area north of the valley, and you have someone jumping George Walker's claim, so he couldn't sell lots with clear titles until 7 years after he settled there. So he was frozen. He was just blown out of the water. So that early geographic advantage resulted in a disadvantage as he couldn't sell lots, and he became by far the smallest of Milwaukee's 3 settlements. I think 1850 he had only 13% of Milwaukee's population, so it was tiny, even though it was half the geography.
If you were to look at any map of Milwaukee, you would notice that many of the streets do not line up across the river. There was next to no cooperation between Kilbourne and Juneau on anything. Some maps that Kilbourne published did not even acknowledge that Juneautown or Walker's Point even existed. Kilbourne paid a steamship to go back and forth along the river to stop the drawbridges from being able to go down. The competition and aggression scared off many potential settlers, and the lack of cooperation halted the area's growth for a time. Compromise was the only way to close the gap between the communities in Milwaukee. There are quite a few different stories for how the Bridge War actually started. In 1840, Wisconsin legislators had a bridge built connecting the East and West to replace the ferry system. Of course, neither side approved. The two sides argued over payment for the bridge. On May 3, 1845, a schooner rammed into the Spring Street Bridge, now Grand Avenue. Rumors spread that the captain of the boat was paid by the East Siders to break the bridge. West Warders then destroyed the western side of the Chestnut Street Bridge. The morning afterwards, East Siders gathered by the bank of the river and made riotous demonstrations against the West Siders. Tensions continued to rise, nearing the point of violence. According to local legend, East Warders loaded a cannon with clock parts and marched to Kilbourne's home. They held their fire only after hearing that his daughter had recently died.
There's some urban legends kind of surrounding the Bridge War. One was that they were about to fire a cannon filled with clockweights in Byron Kilbourne's house and stop only when they realized his daughter had just died. I've not found kind of independent confirmation of those stories. They were told early on, but in terms of the details, I'm a little suspicious about whether or not they're true.
Jonathan E. Arnold is also credited for having helped to calm the situation. Compromise came in 1846, when the two towns were united as the city of Milwaukee. It wasn't exactly what either group wanted, but it dissolved the situation. Almost. Things weren't perfect immediately afterwards. Arguments still happened in the town hall over who got the important new buildings, but violence was no longer probable, and the city has been thriving since.